Hi, I'm Rosie Acosta. I'm a meditation teacher, speaker, and author of You Are Radically Loved, a healing journey to self-love. Look, I grew up in East Los Angeles during the '92 LA riots, and it set me on a troubled path. I didn't grow up with mentors in my life, so I turned to reading as many books as I possibly could to learn about the purpose of life. In my journey, I found that having these conversations gave me life, and I decided I wanted to create a place where I could share these conversations with my community. So come have a sit with me as we learn about, well, everything. Do you know if you're getting enough magnesium? Because 4 out of 5 Americans aren't. And that's a big problem because magnesium is involved in more than 300 biochemical reactions in your body. Today, I want to talk to you about the most common signs to look for that could indicate you're magnesium deficient. Listen carefully to the end because there's a special offer happening and this could be exactly what you need. Okay, here we go. Are you irritable or anxious? Do you struggle with insomnia? Do you experience muscle cramps or twitches? Do you have high blood pressure? Are you sometimes constipated? There are dozens of symptoms of magnesium deficiency, so these are just a few of the most common ones. Now, here's what most people don't know. Taking just any magnesium supplement won't solve your problem because most supplements use the cheapest kinds that your body can't use or absorb. That's why I exclusively recommend Magnesium Breakthrough. It's the only full-spectrum magnesium supplement with 7 unique forms of magnesium that your body can actually use and absorb. All Bioptimizer supplements are best in class. If for some reason you feel differently, you can get a full refund, no questions asked. They are so confident that they offer 365-day money-back guarantee. Just go to www.bioptimizers.com/radically loved. Use the promo code radicallyloved10. You can get gifts with your purchase. You can get 2 travel-sized bottles of Magnesium Breakthrough. Act fast. This is a limited time offer. Go to bioptimizers.com/radically loved and use the promo code radicallyloved10.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Radically Loved podcast. This is Tessa. I have a very special guest joining me today. We have Michelle Brock on the show, who is a New York City-based spiritual development life coach who specializes in past life regression. Her work has been featured on Inside Amy Schumer, and her clients include celebrities, CEOs, writers, artists, and academics. And I just have to be fully transparent here, y'all that are listening. Michelle and I, this is round 2 for our recording. We had an epic conversation the first time around, and we were just kind of cracking up this morning because we both were like, ooh, I better wake up early this morning. And so here we are again, recording another epic conversation for you. And I'm looking forward to talking to you again, Michelle. How are you today?
I'm good. Thank you for having me back on, right? I appreciate your time.
Oh my gosh. Likewise. Such a blessing. And you're just like about ready to go. Your book just launched out into the world. You're about ready to go down to Miami and have a book signing. And I mean, this is like exciting.
I'm having the best week. Yeah. My book came out on Tuesday. I'm going to do an event in Miami at Books and Books in Coral Gables. And it's just feels like this launch, like after giving birth, you celebrate. So here's my book, baby.
So
Who
beautiful.
do you think you are? I love it. It's just exciting to have it out there and start to hear back from people what they think about it and hear the conversations that hopefully people start having about past lives based on kind of some of my ideas in the book. So thank you for letting me on to talk about it.
Oh my gosh, it's our pleasure. And that I just have to say that bookstore in Miami is one of Rosie and my favorite bookstores. And
Yeah.
when her book came out, You Are Radically Loved, she and I went on a little field trip there, and it's such a beautiful. You've been there before, right?
I have been there before, but never as an author. So this is going to be
Oh,
exciting. Yeah.
I'm so jealous. I want to come
Yeah.
with you.
Come.
Oh my gosh. I will. I'm hopping on a plane right now.
Yep.
So the book, yeah, it's, and the subtitle is An Interactive Journey.
An interactive journey through your past lives and into your best future.
Thank you. Yeah.
You're
So, and I
welcome.
want to call
Yeah.
out because number one, truly, it is an interactive journey, and I've had the honor of having an advanced copy and having to be able to work through it. And yeah, I've been using it like a journal kind of, or like journal prompts, and thinking about how to make that connection with this idea of having past lives. And I wanted to kind of define that because we are talking about reincarnation, right?
Yes, we are talking about reincarnation. We're talking about the idea, the concept that before we were born in this life, that we lived before in other bodies, other forms, and that after death, there's a part of us that does survive death and reincarnates and has other physical experiences. Some people call that the soul, the spirit. It doesn't really matter what you call it, higher self, authentic self. But that's the premise behind the work that I do, and that you can recall your past life experiences because they exist only unconsciously in your mind.
Yeah, okay. So, and then how does this relate to intuition? I was thinking about this morning, when I was describing, I have this feeling that I need to be ready to go. And is there any sort of like little tells we can start to pay attention to in our lives if we want to make that connection with past lives? How
Ooh, I
does
love that.
intuition
Yeah.
relate?
I think a lot of people have kind of myths and misconceptions about intuition or like psychic abilities, right? All human beings are intuitive or psychic, right? And I think some people talk about people are born with a gift. Intuition and psychic abilities is something you can develop. Some people are kind of born with maybe more of it, right? Like athletes are better at sports, or people who are born naturally gifted at music, but they still have to practice, hone a skill over time. So, you had this kind of just knowing that you needed to wake up early this morning, which is so funny. We were talking, I did too. Um, you know, I think that these are really common experiences, and we don't speak about them in this culture as openly and practically as possibly we should. And I think a lot of people have intuitive senses of who they were before in their past lives. So, being in the same way that you kind of just knew you needed to get up, a lot of people tell me that, the first time they traveled somewhere, they walked around as if they'd been there before, or you smell something cooking that comes from another culture that you're not familiar with, and it's resonates. Some memory and smell are very connected as well. So I think that people that have dreams are intuitive psychic experiences, right? So our past lives kind of lie in that realm of some people are better or can more easily access their past life memories, but those of us who it doesn't come as easily can practice. And that's kind of what I designed the book around, is to inspire people to look at uncovering their past lives as a practice and as a lifelong kind of goal, because there's always more to know. And over time, to get to know your past life personas and be familiar with them so that you can better know yourself, and then decide who you want to become in the future based on where you've been in the past. Did that
Well,
answer that question?
oh yeah, I love it. I love it. And so my follow-up is like, okay, let's use dreams as a means to beginning the practice of tapping your past life
Mhm.
regressions. What do we pay attention to? How do we start to invite that in?
Yeah, I talk about this in the book, that a lot of times people don't understand that you can actually invite dreams, right? You can kind of prime your unconscious. And that's what I designed all of the journaling prompts, and there's creative exercises designed to kind of open your unconscious mind to start thinking about past lives. When you go to a museum to kind of think and muse like, oh, I wonder if I feel connected to any of these objects, right? So your unconscious mind is your teacher, right? It'll show you things that are important. And I think all of us can recall having that dream that kind of hit you over the head that you can't ignore. But oftentimes it is more subtle. So it's about becoming friends with your unconscious mind, your inner self, your higher self, and then learning to navigate that and discover more about your past lives and about your potential and kind of, the lessons that you incarnated right now to learn to help you navigate this life. My book is really kind of about your present and also your future. It's not about getting stuck in the past or being obsessed with the past. It's about using your past lives as a tool to navigate your life today and to have a more fulfilling and better future, the one that you decide, the one that you're creating.
Yeah, that's such a helpful reminder. I think so often we can get kind of caught up in what does it mean? I think it's around the realm of like the fear of what if I remember something I don't want to re-experience? What if it's too much for me? How do we embrace that fear, kind of get over the hump in order to start to experience our life right now and look forward to the future?
Yeah, and I think that's a really, really common fear. A lot of people are worried, because obviously you can't have a past life if you didn't die. We're talking about death, right? We're talking about trauma. We're talking about, you don't have to be a historian to know that, people have, experienced terrible things, but also joyful things as well. So the way that it works by allowing your unconscious mind to guide you to the past lives, through the exercises that I give people and also through, meditation practice, is that your unconscious mind is your greatest teacher. It's also your protector. So that's why I don't like people to really focus so much on specific time periods, or if something isn't coming to you very easily, to really kind of force it, let it come. It's an unfolding process, because if something comes to you from a past life in that natural, open way, it means you're a person who's ready to handle it, right? But it's also not reliving it. It's remembering it, which is a lot different. And a lot of people feel some sense of relief. There's an unloading and an unburdening of your past by just recalling it. So it might feel emotional. It's not necessarily the past life itself that's impacting your life today. It's the way that past life made you feel. It's the emotional content that we bring with us from our past lives and that is informing us in our present life today. Right? So we want to bring that emotional content up in order to release it and be free from it. Because if it stays in your unconscious, it's going to continue to rule your thoughts and your behavior, but you won't know, the story connected to it. You won't know the source. So the past life work gives you a chance to assign a story to whatever is happening unconsciously in your mind. So it no longer just runs the show. Then you're actively and consciously participating in your healing and your present and, again, the future.
Yeah. Okay. So my follow-up question to that is then, how do you know how can you be certain you're having a past life regression? And I say this from the perspective of feeling like that intuitive tinglies, and definitely recurring dreams, and feeling like I've had, I don't know if it would be a past life regression, but I've had like experiences where I'll wake up for a dream. I'm kind of in that lucid in between state of wake and sleep. And I'll feel like this happened to me when my grandpa died. So I'll share this story really quickly. I was in high school, and my grandpa was, he was in hospice. He had lung cancer. And we knew he was pretty close to the end. So this night that he died, he passed away. I didn't know it yet, but I was dreaming and I woke up and I saw this like shadow, this figure in my room, or maybe it was in my hallway. And to me, it felt really scary. I was like, what is that? There's this like a spirit here. And I just remember feeling like, I want to say there was some sort of reassurance there. After I woke up and I felt that initial fear, there was some sort of like reassurance. It's okay. And then fast forward to so that was high school. That was my senior year of high school. And then I went off to college, and I was in my college dorm room, and I had these big windows that opened floor to ceiling, and they didn't have any screens on them. So I would leave I went to college in a really beautiful, picturesque place. So I got to look at the mountains. There was birds singing and stuff. So I had my windows open all the time. And one day a bird flew into the window, and I'm not kidding. It sat on my hand. This is like for real. It
Like
sat
a
on my
Snow
hand.
White moment or
Like a
something, right?
Snow White moment. And to me, I thought of my grandpa. I'm not sure why. It was just like my grandpa popped into my head. And we just kind of sat there, and the bird like looked at me and I looked at it, and it was, I don't know how long it was. It's probably only a couple of seconds. It felt like forever. And then it just kind of flew off. So I think
Wow.
of experiences like that
Yeah.
that I don't really know how to define as what it is, what it means. And maybe that's the mystery, right? But I think the question that I'm trying to get to is like, how do we know we're having a past life regression? How can we be sure that that's a memory?
Okay. First of all, beautiful experiences. I believe that a lot of us have these experiences that are like little breadcrumbs, right? That lead us to new levels of understanding or new levels of awareness, almost like an awakening. Like I know that that term is often overused in kind of spiritual circles, but I think that it's an unfolding process, a lot like a flower unfolding, right? So in high school, you had that experience and you look back on it, and it's like now with your current understanding, you're looking back on it in a different way, right? In the same way, we can look back at our past lives and kind of go, oh, that was a younger version of me who didn't know so much. Back to your question, though, it's been my experience that the difference between something that's fantasy or projection or something you saw in a movie or read in a book and an actual past life memory is that the past life memory usually has a very specific emotional quality to it, right? And it is often difficult to trust, like how you were saying that bird came on your finger and your grandfather popped into your head. There's always room for doubt, right, with that, right? And again, I don't think we talk about these type of experiences as openly in this culture as we should. I'm hoping to try to change that, and you obviously are too with this podcast. That these are human experiences, and following your intuition is an individual process, right? And I talk a lot in the book about belief versus truth. It's one thing to kind of have faith in something or read something and kind of like, oh, well, that feels true. But if you have an experience, right, of it, then that can become your own truth, right? And you can be like, well, my grandfather came and visited me in the form of a bird, right? That's your truth. And what might be true for you might not be true for someone else. I think that's important to kind of remember. But, you know, when you do hit on something that comes from a past life, most people feel a very, very strong resonance with it that is usually emotional in nature and hard to ignore.
Yeah. Okay. That's helpful. Well, so I wanted to hear about is it okay if you share your origin story? How did you come to
Yeah.
this work? I mean, I know it was related to an experience you had.
Yeah, it was. So I actually, I was going through this period of my life where I think I just hit a wall, right? Like I was going through the motions of life. I lost my mother when I was 2. She died from cancer. And, I had a lot of loss and grief in my life. And, my grandmother had just died, who was my mother's mother. So it felt like losing my mother all over again. I was in a marriage that really wasn't serving either of us. I had 2 kids that were both in diapers. And I just thought, I literally had one of those kind of crisis moments, like dark moment of the soul. I was fine. My health was fine. I was, living in a nice house, all of these things, but it felt like kind of an existential crisis, right? I think a lot of people can relate to. And at the time, my sister had just given birth to my youngest nephew. And she had this experience after giving birth that was kind of a mini stroke, and like a pocket of fluid traveled up her spinal column and into her brain. And she had a tiny little aneurysm. And she's fine now and the baby was fine. But during that episode, she started speaking a language that neither of us could understand, right? And they're obviously trying to save her life. But one of the doctors was like, it kind of sounded like, maybe an ancient language, like we couldn't recognize it. But yet it had an emotional quality to it. Again, with the emotional stuff, it wasn't gibberish. It was like she was trying to say something. And so they gave her in the hospital this book recommendation. They're like, well, there was a guy who used to work in this hospital who wrote a book called Many Lives, Many Masters, Dr. Brian Weiss. And if I'm sure a lot of your listeners have heard of this book, it's been around for a really long time, but it was basically a story about a patient he had in therapy. He's an MD psychiatrist in that hospital who was regressing back to past life memories and became healed and became happy and intuitive. And, my sister gave me that book. I read it in one sitting. There was something about it that just lit me up. I was like, this is the most compelling thing I've ever read in my entire life. And then I went and I looked, I was like, I want to talk to this woman who had this experience. Turns out he doesn't even use her real name. And it was obviously therapy. So it was a private, experience. But I found out that he was lecturing somewhere near where I was living. So I went, and of course, there's all these people. He's a very well-known author at this point. This is like almost 20 years ago. And he said, I can only get one person to come up from the audience and volunteer to do this. And even though we were doing group exercises, very similar to what I introduced in the book. So I was having images and things kind of come up, but he called me up on stage, and in front of hundreds of people, I had this experience that completely changed my life and shattered my view of who I thought I was. So in my past life, I was a man, which is really interesting because I strongly identify with being a cisgender female in this life. So that immediately was like, wait a second, what is going on? And there were a lot of elements about that past life story that related to my life now. It's kind of a long story, and it's actually in one of Brian's other books called Miracles Happen. I also highly recommend that. But basically, at the end of it, it was like years of therapy in just a few moments where I figured out all these different elements about, my mother's death, the way my father dealt with losing my mother, being a parent myself and raising children, my marriage and the state of my marriage at the time. We got divorced after that, and we had this really, really beautiful, like, kitchen table divorce where we were just like, this isn't working. Let's let each other go. All of this beauty and realization about what life was, what it means, and how to create the future moving forward, and so I learned how to do the technique a few months later. I went home and the past lives just started pouring out. I had past life dreams. I had different kind of things come to me. I had several experiences where I went places I knew I had been before, and I could kind of describe, locations or things or smell things that I could identify. I was in a Ayurvedic store one time, and I described a spice that I'd never smelled before. My friend was like, how do you know what that is? Like, right? Because she was from India, and she's like, everyone in India knows what that is. I've never been to India in this life, but I was able to recognize that. So again, following the breadcrumbs, I kind of started to piece together different things about my past lives and different elements of who I was. And so that became the basis of my coaching practice. I've really done this work myself. I've walked the walk, and I used past lives to transform kind of not only the way that I see myself, but the way I choose to live my life and how I want to create the future moving forward. And so I wrote this book to kind of help be a guide to help others have this equally life-changing experience themselves, hopefully.
Yeah. Oh, it's for yes, I can attest to that.
Okay.
And another theme you pull on in the book is fate versus destiny, and you clearly define the difference between those two. And I'd love it if you could explain that here.
Yeah, I think that a lot of people think that the future, is just something that happens, that we can't control it, right? And that idea of fate, or I met somebody because it was fated, or, right? Obviously there are things that do happen that are out of our control, natural disasters. We can't control the, you know, actions of others or governments, or right, institutions that we might be a part of. But what I introduce in the book is that there's always an element of choice, right? So sometimes things happen to you and that you always have a choice, even how you respond to it, right? And that's more of the idea of destiny, that destiny is something that we're actively creating. We're creating the future with our own choices each minute of every day. And so looking at our past lives as how we got to where we are right now helps us look at where we are, figure out what we want to change about the future, and then actively move forward to the future that we want to create. And that's true both personally and collectively as a society.
Mm. Oh, I love this. So it's so helpful. I often have this kind of debate with my friend about fate versus destiny. So when I read that, I was like, yes. And I want to just address, we talked a little bit about how to use it. I think I said it in the beginning where I've been using it as, kind of like a journal and helpful meditation prompts. But what else would you say to the person who's picking up the book about how you intended it to be used?
Yeah, I really intended it to be for anyone who's curious, right? I wanted it to be an entry, for people who've never heard of this, or if you've been doing this work for years and years, to give you new ideas to kind of add to your practice, right? I really wanted it to kind of open people up to the idea that it is a constant practice to become better friends with your unconscious mind and really just start to look at not only yourself, but others and the events that happen to you in your life, your circumstances, including your parents. I introduced the idea that we choose our parents. And because I have teenage children, that is something I remind them of all the time. Um, but I believe that we choose our bodies, our circumstances, where we're born, and we choose that process in order to maximize our ability to learn and grow. And so when you start to look at everything through that past life lens, right? That like, oh, maybe I like this food because I was there in a past life. One of my favorite exercises in the book is that I invite people to design the idea where, you go on a vacation and you meet with your friends afterwards. And, I'm a lot older than probably a lot of people listening to, but back in the day, we used to do these like slideshows where we would show people like our photos from the trip, or a photo album from the trip or a video montage. And so you've just come back from one of your past lives and you're telling your friends, like, this was my experience in Italy. Was it like, oh, was that last summer? No, in the 1500s, right? And so then that once you start to acknowledge that your past lives exist and that you start to remember details of your past lives, they can become part of your usable memory experience, your memory bank, right? And they can also become, wisdom that you've already worked hard to earn that you can access and use to better navigate your life today.
Mm. So what are your thoughts on then multiple reincarnations, and what's the purpose behind that? If like is there a goal to, reach your highest good or complete some sort of soul's purpose? Is there an end to that soul journey when we've evolved?
Okay, great question. It's kind of two-pronged. I'm going to start with the second part first. The idea that there's an end, I really don't know, right? I know that some kind of religious traditions talk about being liberated from the reincarnational cycle. And it's true. I mean, right? Like when we're on the other side, when we're in spirit form, that's home. That's bliss, where we're all connected and we're born in a body. It's like, oh, back here again, got to learn, got to go through painful experiences and experience separateness, which, is an illusion, all of that. I don't really know, though, if there's an end to that cycle. I don't think that Earth is the only place that we can reincarnate as well. I think that there are other realms and other places, an infinite amount of possibilities, right? So because I'm such a student of nature, I look at the continual cycles of nature as never ending. And because we're a part of nature, to me, reincarnation kind of fits in that there, if it's a circle, where does it ever end, right? There's probably no end. There's just ways that it can evolve and change. The first part of your question is super interesting. I have had people recall past lives that they've lived kind of simultaneously, where they're kind of having one past life on one part of the world and one past life in the other part of the world. I think that what that is their soul deciding to split in order to maximize their potential for growth and opportunity. So, I don't think it's common. Most people do recall kind of past lives that are in some linear time frame, like there was this one in the 1800s and this one in the 1700s. But because we're starting to learn things about the nature of time itself, that time actually doesn't exist, so that's kind of adding another wrench to it too. Like, are they simultaneous past lives, or are all of our lifetimes happening simultaneously? Mathematically, that's actually what they say is happening. But as our human brains actually experience time as linear. So most people will recall past lives in the past rather than in the present. So I don't know if that answered that question, but to me, anytime anybody tells me anything about the realm of possibility, I'm always like, why not? Right? Like there's so much more we can learn about our existence. And I think that process is probably infinite, right? Are we ever done learning? Are we ever done growing or evolving? More than likely not.
Yeah. Oh, it's so interesting. Well, so why do you think we forget? And, I'm not the expert. I haven't really studied this to the depth that you have, obviously, but it seems to me like children are so much closer. Young ones are so much closer to that realm, that experience of, possibility. And then it seems like we go through this transition as we get older where we forget, or maybe we become jaded, or maybe both.
I think I think there's an unlearning, right? And it's interesting. A lot of young children talk about past lives too. And I remember when I first got into this work, my children were both toddlers. And, one time I remember when my daughter was about 3, I went and asked her, I was like, do you remember before when you used to be big? And her answer blew me away. I did not expect it from her at all. It was some like really dark story. And I was like, what did you get that from? And my daughter's kind of a deep thinker, but I was like, wow. And then my son used to talk about things related to past lives too. One time when he was about that age, about 4, he came into the kitchen and he was like, so I used to have a different mom, and her hair was dark, and I can't remember what her name was, but I really miss her. Is that okay? And I was like, yeah, buddy. I was like, maybe that was your mom in a past life. And he was like, oh, okay. He was feeling guilty about having feelings about another mother that wasn't me, and I think that is really common. I think that, like, again, in our culture, we don't talk about these things as openly, I think, as we should, right? So maybe the challenge is in the forgetting, right? And I think that that's the conditioning too, right? In our culture, we start to go to school around like 4 or 5. We clam up about things like we don't talk about this anymore, kind of goes away. That happened to me. I was actually very intuitive child. I had a lot of really interesting kind of mediumistic experiences. I saw, my mother, after she passed, she used to come to visit me. And the way that she looked to me was like in that movie Pinocchio, the old school one, the blue fairy who has that's what she looked like to me. So I actually wanted to be the blue fairy for Halloween when I was 3, which was the first year after she passed. And to me, that was like but she was my spirit guide, and she could kind of come to me. And it kind of went away when I started going to school. I don't know if it ever really went away, but it just stopped being open to it. And then in my late 20s, early 30s, it came back, with a little bit of a vengeance. Although I had some experiences before, what you were talking about your experience in high school. And then again, when you were a little older, I think that that's common. And perhaps that remembering process is a lesson in of itself, right? Maybe that's part of the challenge of this earth school, is that we're supposed to forget in order to remember who we actually are, which is a soul, not a body, on a journey over many lifetimes, here to learn lessons about love and all of those things. And I think that that is the challenge and why we're here. And some of us are able to remember it more easily, right? And maybe certain people choose more challenging lifetimes, or lifetimes where they're more cut off from their intuition, or don't live in a culture that celebrates, such things. I think we have to have a variety of experiences in order to get the full, amount of lessons that are available to us on this earth realm, this earth
Yeah.
school. So
Yeah. Well, what are your thoughts then on the idea of being a new soul, or, people say, oh, she's an old soul, young soul, in terms of like, is it possible to have this be your, like right now, this be my first incarnation as a soul?
Okay, I love this question. I don't like the term old soul because I don't believe that age guarantees wisdom, right? You can be old and ignorant. Many people are. I like to use the term evolved soul because it implies that, we're here not just spinning our wheels, we're doing work, right? And I think most people can kind of recognize the qualities of an evolved soul. They're more gentle, kind, loving, compassionate, giving, all of those things. But as far as, and I hear people tell me this too, they're like, well, I'm brand new, I'm a starseed. I'm like, if it's 2024 and you're brand new to earth, you in the wrong place, I think. Right? I mean, I think that if life is a school, things are challenging today, right? Maybe they're from another realm or another. Great, welcome, right? I don't know, but like, I think for most of us, we're here to get our PhD in how to love each other right now, with kind of what's going on, all over the globe, and the amount of divisiveness that we continue to experience, while at the same time having all of this connection through technology and watching something on YouTube that happened to someone on the other side of the world, and we're able to feel connected to it. So there's more opportunities for growth and learning and finding that connectivity, and common humanity, which is a big theme of the book, right? Like that if you're a soul, not a body, so is everyone else, right? So why would you think like to hate someone for the way they look, or judge them for their life circumstances or the color of their skin, right? That the true identity is the one that lies kind of within. So, if you are a new soul, like I said, I'm open to any possibility. I have yet to meet one. Come forward, make yourselves known. But, the way that I look at it is that there's a lot that is challenging us today, and that most of us have been here a few times before in order to participate in what's happening on the planet, and the consciousness that we're being asked to kind of step into, right? The future that we're being asked to create that features more equality, more acceptance, more love, all of those things. And that requires some maturities on a soul level, I think.
Yeah, that's such a helpful reminder. Thank you, Michelle. It's such a blessing and a pleasure to spend time with you. And I love having your great work in my hands and in my home. And I can't wait to share it with everyone.
Thank you.
Congrats again on your book. Who do you think
Thank
you
you.
are?
Yeah.
An interactive journey through your past lives and into your best future. I hope you have so much fun in Miami this weekend.
Thank you. Thank you
yeah.
so much. And thank you for having me on, and for all of your really insightful, thoughtful questions, and for letting me talk about my life's work, which I'm clearly passionate about.
Oh,
Thank you for sharing the passion.
oh
Yeah.
my gosh, absolutely. One last logistical question. Where do you like to connect with people most on the socials?
Oh, sure. I'm on Instagram. I'm Past Life Michelle. I'm also on TikTok, Past Life Michelle. And you can find a lot of stuff about events and webinars I do and different meditations I have on my website, which is Michelle with 2Ls dash Brock, BROCK.com. And I hope, everybody shares their experiences with their book and their share past lives, so we can start having conversations about who you were in a past life. And I'm really excited to hear how people are experiencing the book. So
Oh, so cool. Thank you, Michelle. I really appreciate it.
thank you so much.
Thank you so much for listening to the Radically Loved podcast. Please remember to subscribe, rate, and review wherever you get your podcast, and follow us on Facebook at Radically Loved Rosie, on Instagram at Rosie Acosta, and Twitter at Rosie Acosta. By the way, this is original music by DJ Taz Rashid. You can follow DJ Taz on Spotify and check out the best music for yoga and meditation. This has been a Mod Pod Studio production. Check them out at www.modpodstudio.com.